Happy Saturday. How is everybody? Today, I want to talk about something really interesting. I was at a wedding uh, last week and I was sitting next to someone who, hey, Autumn, good to see you. I was sitting next to a man who is a entrepreneur, businessman, born here in America, but is Muslim. And he was talking about how he said, anytime there is violence, look for injustice. And I was like, wow, that is a really good point. Anytime we see societal violence and people fighting back, right, whether that is people rushing into the Capitol, whether that is people in the Black Lives Movement marching, whether that's rioting that happens due to police brutality or racial discrimination, um, whether that is terrorism, you know, anytime we see or guerrilla warfare or all of this sort of stuff, whenever we see societal violence, our instinct is to just condemn the violence, which of course is wrong, right? The violence is wrong. It's, smashing and destroying other people's property or things like that. But um, that's not the root cause. So instead, to look for what is the injustice that's causing this violence. What is that sense of injustice that is causing these people to be so angry that they are rising up and trying to fight back, and maybe doing it in ways that are terrible and that are even more violating to other people, right, and their lives and their livelihood. But we won't end that cycle or stop it until we look for and stop the injustice. And I think the truth is that most societies, most governments, right, they're often the ones causing the injustice. So it's not necessarily in their interest to go search out the cause of that injustice and to fix it. Instead, they just try to squash the violence and condemn the people who are being violent. And I think that's a very serious mistake because it doesn't really change the situation at all. So that's a thought that I would leave you with today is, how does, when we see violence, do we look for the injustice? Do we say, well, what's going on? Why are these people so angry? Why are they rising up? Has their livelihood been taken away from them? Have they been suffering under years of subjugation and abuse and, um, you know, economic inequality, right? And so, yeah, that's something I wanted to share today. I thought that was very impactful insight. And so I hope that you take that with you and use it, think about it, and talk to me, ask me questions. I would say one of the concepts of justice is, people think of it as fairness, but to me, fairness is actually a false concept. Assuming fairness assumes that everything is exactly the same, right? So let's say you had three people in a lifeboat, and one was a child, one was an older person, one was a young person, and you had three biscuits, sea biscuits, okay? Well, in that case, you might share them all equally, right? And that would be fair, right? But what if you had only one or two biscuits, right? And then you break that up and share that each equally? Or do you say, okay, well, in this situation, what do we need to do to be fair? Can the child last longer without food, or the older person or the younger person, right? Maybe we don't distribute it equally. Maybe we divvy it up in a different way for the outcome we're trying to get. So there are situations in which fairness is the right standard, but I think they're relatively rare. It's more of it's kind of a false concept. And the concept of justice as fairness is, and that's something we're super tied to, right? Like fairness, right? Super tied to that concept. instead looking for the key underlying stuff that is going on, right? What are the real circumstances? It's not just everything's not just the same all the time, right? How do we stand up against injustice when this is happening, right? How do we bring back how do we look at the situation with clarity, right? So one of the things that one of the definitions of justice is about, there's many definitions about justice. Some is like the law or judges, and some is moral fairness and all of this sort of stuff. And I was thinking about it, and I said, justice to me is where we're not violating each other based on this concept of property rights, right? We're acting in a just way or a moral way means that we're not violating each other. And when and to stop those violations if they are occurring, that is justice. And to be able to engage in property rights and exchanges without bias. I think that's a very good way to see it, without bias. So often what's going on in our exchanges in society, right, especially when we're dealing with groups that have really suffered under discrimination, then there is a lot of inherent bias. There's a lot of subconscious bias that's happening, which affects the outcome, which affects the negotiation, which affects the transaction, right? Anything from, people submitting their resume and, having it passed over because they have a certain type of a name, which makes them sound like they're from a particular ethnic group, right? And not getting a fair shot at that. There's all of this subconscious bias that comes into place. And so I think figuring out like what really is justice, it's not like, well, we just take everything and distribute it all equally, right? That's fair. Well, that's not fair. It's not fair to the people who worked harder for it or who learned more, who did more, right? All of that kind of stuff. On the other hand, people are not playing on an equal playing field. They don't really have equal opportunity. They don't have access to education. They don't have access to resources where they could better themselves. Like, they have the desire to better themselves. So like what I'm doing right now with Financial Ninjas, I'm discovering so many, there's different types of investment opportunities. There's different types of structures and strategies that the wealthy and the educated use to save on taxes. And I'm not talking about the educated in our college systems, because we don't even learn that in there, right? That's not taught to us there at all, because the college level is not actually the elite either. Frankly, they're just like higher level, better educated slaves. So when you're really getting into understanding, like this knowledge is what gives you such an advantage. And when you're brought up in that, sort of echelon of society where they really understand these things and they've been using these mechanisms to protect their wealth, to grow their wealth without taxes, to be able to invest, to make money off of their money, right? And they're just growing like mad, and nobody like else knows about it, right? It's crazy. Like, so how can we, or even the fact that, like, I mean, thank God now, right? I think right now we have, it's different because, it's like the first time in history when almost everybody has access to amazing education and information, right? What is education? Hey, Luxar, good evening. We're talking about justice and social injustice today. So when everyone has access to the same type of education, right? Then to the same information, then that at least begins that playing field, right? But even that's not really true, right? But at least now it's better than it has ever been, right? You can learn to do pretty much anything on YouTube. There are people teaching classes about finance and financial management and stuff like that. If you have an interest, at least now you have a place to go. That was not true for most of society. You had to have that information passed down to use privately from person to person. But still, this type of stuff that I'm talking about, understanding like higher level financial investing and tax structures and stuff like that, that's still not widely known. I mean, you can hunt it down and find it and, really challenge it, but it is still, I think, kind of purposely kept from most people. And then it's not just that, it's like access to funding, right? So like a lot of one of the big issues with women entrepreneurs is that statistically it's much harder for them to get funding for their businesses than it is for male entrepreneurs. And we're talking about like venture capital funding and stuff like that. Far less amount goes to women businesses like a tiny fraction goes to women-owned businesses versus male-owned businesses. Why is that, right? So when we're looking at these type of things, we can see that this stuff is, I don't believe in equality, right? Not everyone is equally capable and equally, able to do different things. But I believe that fundamentally, we all have equal rights, and that's different. We all have equal rights, and the equal rights in the protection of ourselves and our body. And as we search for helping people, we need to create equal opportunity, right? It's going to be up to them to choose to take advantage of that opportunity or not, but it's creating equal opportunity. But we're not doing that if we're not giving people information and we're not giving people access, right? And so when people discover that and they see, like, there's so many people out there that they work hard, right? There's a lot of times that people at the top are like, well, those guys are just lazy and they don't want to work hard and that's why they're not successful, and that kind of bullshit, right? But that's not true. So many of us work really, really hard. There's so many people out here working hard, but they're not taught how to work smart for money, right? They're not taught what to do with their money. So that's why they're not successful, not because they're not hardworking. There's plenty of people out here that have 2 and 3 jobs. They are working their butts off, but they don't have the education and the understanding. And I don't mean a college education, although often not that either, but they don't have the understanding of how to structure themselves and their finances. And oftentimes, they're subject to enormous bias and discrimination. So those are such key issues to me, right? And so when we're thinking about social justice, it is making sure that people are not being violated in a way and that people are able to transact and to learn, et cetera, without bias. I think those are 2 really key aspects of it. And when we think about the violations that are happening, right, when you have a huge percentage of a certain population being thrown into jail for something that other people are not being thrown, like the Black population is being thrown into jail over it, and the white population is kind of getting more of a slap on the hand, right? For the same type of crimes or whatever, then, which is a whole other discussion about what should or shouldn't be crimes. But, then that is bias. That is enormous bias. And of course that's going to create, and that jeopardizes their ability to make money, to vote, to participate, right? So of course that's going to create anger against that injustice. So this is why I thought that it was just such a beautiful way, such an insight to ask yourself, because of course I'm very much against violence and destruction of property and killing and all of these things, because these are violations of our core primary rights of each person. However, when we see this stuff happening, when we see violence in society, look for the injustice. Ask yourself, what's going on here? Why are these people so mad? What is the injustice that they are experiencing? Because it's there. It's there. There is something there when you really look. And you don't just let people say, oh, well, they're just crazy. they're just dumb. They're just this, right? And they try to, especially the media tries to just blow it off and say, oh, well, they're just crazy, right? No, when people are that angry, there is something going on. There is an injustice that's happening. So, it's up to us to go and figure out what that injustice is, and to ask ourselves, can we as a society, can we as individuals try to work to end it? So that's what I was going to talk about today. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Hi, Aurelia. Hi, Luxar. Hi, Milani. Hey, Autumn. It's good to see everyone. Go back and listen to this if you're coming in late. This is about injustice and social justice. So Autumn says, very thought-provoking, equality versus fairness. Thank you for posing this comparison. Powerful stuff. Yes. So there's a difference between fairness and really understanding equality of opportunity, and a lack of bias, right, in those opportunities. So, all right, you guys have an amazing, amazing Saturday. Have some fun. Have a great day. Bye.